Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is dedicated to things that, we general discussion about media and virtual production. Any questions you may have around that. Our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little more time on. Today, we've got Charles Kline here. He's going to talk about matching cameras with LUTs in Resolve. Really cool. Anyway, so stay tuned for that. And then tomorrow, of course, we have the longer day, Saturday, education at 8 o'clock. And we don't stream that. It is an incredible conversation. And it's really, we're really digging into some really interesting concepts around education and the future of education. I would highly recommend it. And then at noon, we're going to go back to the Belfast method, but in Massachusetts or in Connecticut. So we'll have Todd Reynolds is going to play some incredible music for us, and we're going to take over the switcher. We're going to add the graphics all remotely. So it's going to be really interesting. Todd's worth just listening to by himself, and then you get to actually learn how this whole thing happens. So it's really, really interesting. And we have a separate link, and that's going out into the email that you get every morning. All right, let's jump into the questions, Bill.
Absolutely. The first one this morning comes in from Ken Jordan here on the panel in Surrey in the UK. And he says, after many months of finding accurate advice from office hours, I'm becoming more skeptical of professional YouTube, quote, audiovisual tech reviewers. Which tech communicators do you follow? And more important, why do you trust them?
Go ahead, Charles.
So for my field in particular, and it also depends on what I'm looking for. If I'm looking for something general, I'm a fan of, let's say MKBHD. He's been a good source of just nice general Apple, Samsung, all kind of stuff, phones, tablets, laptops. He's great. A bit more in the weeds, and let's say like for color, there are more YouTubers, or let's say professionals that are coming out as YouTubers or just showing what they do. That's been a dark art for so many years. So there is Darren Moston. He's great. I follow him. I follow Color Lab AI. And also there's a new guy that started to do videos. He's really in the weeds, but his name is Cullen Kelly. And if you want to get into a bit of color science and break your brain a little bit, I would follow him.
That's great. Yeah, go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, so having spent some time with these reviews, I've become very cynical of them, and I tend to look through three lenses. Do the people understand the technology? Do they actually understand the business model they're talking about? And do they actually understand in consumers or business those markets? And it's hard to find people that understand all three of those. So I end up picking people I enjoy watching. So I'm MacBreak Weekly and Rene and all those people because I enjoy MKBD, people like that. And then if I really want to find someone who understands the technology, I look for a boring website like an Antec. The more boring the website, sometimes the better the technology.
Very good. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, it's the podcasters that got my attention on this, specifically on YouTube. Casey Neistat, again, was not necessarily a technologist, but he sure brought a lot of people to the platform and made a lot of money and also experimented a lot. His protege is Peter McKinnon, that kind of came in behind him, specifically in the camera arena. But again, they were looking at what is the entertainment as well as what was the technology. And of course, Photo Joseph is kind of magical. And then Aaron, who's on our Discord, has what's Aaron's name? Aaron's last name?
Parecki.
Anyway, Parecki is technically as well as entertainment. And then of course the godfather of all of this is the guy that that I think, Alex, you know him because he did the whole thing on After Effects, and he taught us what's his name, and he's working at like Lucasfilm now or something.
Kramer?
Yes. Oh, he's the godfather of all of this, entertaining and educational.
Go ahead, John.
I lost my mouse there. Yeah, so here's one you guys probably haven't seen is Dave's Garage. Dave's one of the early team members of Microsoft. He actually wrote Task Manager on Windows. Right now he's doing drag racing between like 40 different programming languages. And he does projects with Arduinos and LEDs and shows you how he upgraded to 10 gigabits. It's a fantastic channel and well produced.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I suppose my growing cynicism has come from being when you have real experts like Mickey, it's his job, it's his profession, so his advice on why a particular piece of equipment work well in that particular scenario, because so many of them seem to be literally professional reviewers now, or so far removed from the business that are they really being objective with that review, or they actually don't know the actual business case for it, and their testing regimes seem arbitrary to what actually is needed.
Yeah, I think that it's really easy for reviewers to fall into the trap of coming up with theoretical ideas of why something's important and not important when it's not actually important or important. And I think that I know that I've come to rely on this group probably more than any other, because we've got experts, whether it's audio or color or editing or, IT. There's people in here that answer those questions, and I'm much more leaning. I mean, of course, I watch some of the stuff Renee does, and Marquez Brownlee and Justine, and some of the other folks that we've had on here too. But I will admit that when I watch not just technical reviews but any news, I pretty much don't take anybody's word for granted. I want to see something coming from a bunch of different directions. I want to see how Al Jazeera, how reports on it, how Fox News reports on it, how MSNBC, NPR, CNN. I want to see what they look like, and I tend to absorb a spattering of that, and then whatever they agree on is probably pretty close to the truth. May not be the truth, but whatever they agree on, and all the other stuff is their opinion. So about it's their story about what happened, and it's rather than what happened. And so I just take it. It's not that I don't listen to it. It's just that I just listen to it as commentary. So I do the same thing with reviewers. I want to see. I'm scanning for data. That they're putting up kind of the hard data, and some of them I don't take anybody's opinion straight on. So next question.
Hasmukh, our frequent panelist and friend from Cape Town, South Africa, is up next with anyone who has had shows on Zoom. What has the experience been? What works and what are the challenges? And if so, have you charged for content?
Go ahead, Sky.
Yes, just this last weekend was our first private ticketed event. And I think it's the education of the audience is the biggest challenge, because we are so used to just getting a one-click go into a meeting experience. We've forgotten how to get dressed, get in our car, go to the parking lot, give the keys to the valet, walk into the theater. All of that stuff that we used to do that was hard, we've gotten so used to it just coming to us. So training your audience that there's going to be a ticketing experience. They will have to be weighted and you'll have to be brought in online. The challenge for us is that we cannot broadcast on Zoom outside of the United States. We've lost audience members that way. It is a growing platform. Think of it as a YouTube with a ticketing. At least this is the way I'm trying to figure it out. Think of it as a YouTube experience, a platform, because they're promoting within their platform as well. So with a ticketing opportunity.
Go ahead, Liberty.
Yes, we've done children's content, actually, done children's shows on Zoom. And so part of that is for just privacy issues. And it's really interactive. So we spotlight the kids and we have a host. So that works really well. We have yet to charge, but that's something we're looking at from a business model perspective to see what would work best. So I'm happy to speak with you on that, Hasmukh, if you're interested.
That's great. Yeah, this is one of the reasons that I'm always a proponent for, like when someone says they want to do a big event, I always say, well, what are the 6 events you want to do before that big event? Because and the reason is that you are flattening the curve. Like everybody learns how to use the platform, everybody learns how to do the process, but package it into something where it doesn't mean that everyone's going to learn it before the big event, but if you can reduce that by 50 or 60 or 70%, where people who are coming repetitively. Now, I also know that eventually people will realize that the 6 events were more useful than the big one, but we just sneak up on that. All right, next question.
Hasmukh is right back again. Actually, has a couple of 3 in here. This one is for the cook along. We have uploaded the recipe ingredients video and a very short 1 to 2 minute recipe method video. Has this been useful? Since we have no feedback, we're not certain whether we should continue the practice of sending those out ahead.
Go ahead, Sky.
Yes, keep doing it. Yes, keep doing it. Because what you're doing is you're training your audience how to participate. They're being observers. They may not be participants as yet because it's a new thing. So continue, practice, repetition, keep it coming.
Go ahead, Liberty.
Yes, repetition. I love that what Sky said, because part of that too is they might not respond immediately, but it's helping them to remember, and it's part of your loyalty, right? It's a part of your brand that's helping to be ingrained in them. And then if you are looking for, okay, well, we haven't gotten feedback, but maybe something to do is to have some kind of interesting question or something that you maybe put onto the video, so that will help them to eventually one of these days, one of those questions will resonate with someone to get some feedback, or just straight ask, put a poll in the email.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yes, just to mirror Liberty's point, on the website was where those videos in office hours are hosted. I will now put a feedback form, so if anyone wants to put feedback, but definitely yes, do keep doing it. It is the numbers are there. I mean, obviously it's small relative to the audience, but the numbers are there. But the feedback form I shall add to that, so we can get some feedback on what people think about it.
I'd love to experiment with some way to do more of a step-by-step with video and text. So, and this gets back into, I've talked about in the past, I have this Heston pan, and the pan is great, but the app is amazing. And it's just, but I think that we could probably do it inside of some kind of pages document where you could just go to the next page or go to the next page that had a video and the text of what to do in it. Because I think that the thing that I find is that it's useful before we do the cook along, but it's really useful afterwards because you can't quite, as Liberty was talking about, you can't quite remember what that last step was. So next question.
Next one comes from Hasmukh, again in Cape Town. It says, can I connect the DPA 4066 through the Blackmagic Mini XLR to XLR audio cable and record the audio track directly on the Blackmagic 6K? Is this a good option or a no-no if I have a Mixpre?
Go ahead, Bill.
You don't have any control, but there is an XLR to the little mini limo connector on the Blackmagic 6K that will allow for a single mono balanced audio connection into the camera. So can you do it? Yes. You don't have any control over that, and it embeds the audio with the video, which is great because it never goes out of sync, but you don't have any control on it unless you take it out of that into something else and do your control there.
Yeah, and I would absolutely do that over using the little headphone jacks in the ATEM. You use the camera XLR inputs. It's definitely the way to go. Next question.
Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California is up next. He says, net 30, net 60, net 90. What's the most common payout time frame, and what do you tend to do for your company?
Go ahead, Charles.
So this really depends on who you're working with. I have clients that are pretty big, and they usually do net 60, net 90. Actually had somebody call me and remind me, hey, we haven't paid you for something that's over 120 days over. And they were freaking out because of legal issues and stuff like that. But then I have some smaller clients that like my work, and they will literally write me a check as soon as I give them an invoice. Right? So it depends on the schedule.
Do you give those guys priority when they write you a check as soon as you give them an invoice? Does that as an artist, as a person, does that incentivize you to work with them?
It's funny because I've had the longest relationship with those clients. It's funny how that works.
Yeah. Go ahead, Liberty.
Yeah, like just as Charles said too, depending on the client, depending on the project. For us, we're typically net 30 unless there are some shorter turnaround projects that we will just like those clients that, hey, before we start, we put that they put that payout in, that it would be like typically Fridays are paydays. We've had the experience of the net 60s, and those are typically the government organizations. Haven't done net 90, so I don't want to see what that really looks like.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Most of our work is corporate pharmaceutical, and they've been holding pretty steady at 60 days. The pandemic has sort of slowed things down for everybody in all areas, but we bill out 30, we get 60. We haven't in many years done the thing where we give a discount for early payment because people would pay late and take the discount, so we don't do that anymore. And one little gripe that I have is clients that come back to you 30 days in after a 30-day bill out and start renegotiating the bill. I just really have no patience for that. So sorry for being rude, but I don't like that.
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
Some of our larger deals are interesting payouts. We're doing a government contract right now, and we did a third up front, third a day of the show, and the third up to 60 days out. If I can do 50 prior to show and then 50 net 30, that's kind of where the ballpark I like to be in.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to what John was saying, because obviously if you can get 30, get 30, most corporates 60, but you may have to break the payments up. So we tend to do a sort of 50, 45, 5 for work we do in people's homes. But if you have to buy kit, don't buy kit. Don't spend your money till they've given you their money. And that's the most important lesson of the lot.
Go ahead, Bill.
We forgot one term, which I even like even more, which is net now. And there are certain circumstances where you can actually make that work, particularly nowadays, even in some of my government clients, for not gigantic bills. If you're billing $100,000, net now is not going to work. But I do voiceovers occasionally, and I'll get $1,000, and some of my government clients will put it on a credit card, and I just get paid for it right when I do it. There are some strategies where you can collapse that. I normally do net 30, and third, and a third has been my tradition too.
Stuart?
This street works both ways. For payment, I like to pay on the nose. I don't want to be having somebody chasing me. I like it done. I'm not in debt. I'm not looking for credit. But when it comes the other way, back when I was doing weddings, it was 50% beforehand, especially if I had to subcontract, because you're doing 4 weddings on a day and you might have another camera guy coming in. And then it'd be 20% on the viewing, 20% on the edit, and 10% on the pickup. For bigger clients, more reliable clients, yes, you can stretch 30 days and 60 days for the small end of the business. But for new clients, a large percentage upfront, just so that you're establishing a relationship.
By the way, my experience is the $2,000 is the limit for a government to put on there without any PO. So just in case you're wondering, like that net now, it turns out about $2,000. If you go 2001, there's a whole bunch of paperwork. 1999 is it goes through really fast. As far as the nets, a lot of times what we do is what we generally work in a 30-day both ways in 090. With Pixel Core, if we had a master service agreement, an MSA, and 3 successful events, we would then get into terms. And those terms, the larger the company, the longer the terms typically. And so your ability to manage your cash flow so that you can take those larger companies, and that includes larger liability insurance and more infrastructure and the bigger you can get. That's why they work with giant agencies that you're getting 1/3 of the cut, is because they can manage that for the company. Making it hard, like calling them at 29 days or 31 days and saying, "Where's my money?" It just means that you're just not going to get hired very much. So being able to absorb that, hard collection with a large corporation just is something that will reduce their interest in hiring you. And so you just have to take that into account. And so we would lightly, at about 35, 40 days, if we were on a net 30, we would lightly say, "Hey, just checking in," and we'd start to get a little edgier at 60 days, and then we'd start to get rougher at 90, and so that was kind of in Pixel Core, that's what we kind of did. And we were working mostly with Fortune 10, so it was just that they're just a big machine. There's a lot of people that have to sign things. And if you get impatient, they won't tell you. This is the problem with all of business. People don't tell you that they're upset. They just stop calling. So you have to, so you have to kind of read between the tea leaves of pushing really hard. I know when people fiddle with me a lot over invoices and stuff like that, or surprise me or whatever, that just goes through the back of my head, like, "Oh, okay, well," like when you think about hiring that person, you go, "Oh," is that going to be like more paperwork and more phone calls and more emails, and so it's not just your skill, it's your ability to manage all of these things in a nice, comfortable way. So anyway, just something to always take into account when you think about collection. Next question. Noah
Sargent in Fullerton, California is up next, and he says, "Whoops, that did the whole different thing. Not only did it not advance."
No behind the scenes. Just ask the question.
Sorry.
Right.
We're moving to Tesla's shareholder meeting had a weird skip happening in their live stream. Anyone know what could cause this? And there's a link there.
Go ahead, Noah. Can you tell us what happened there?
Yeah. So actually, I think I could.
Was it constant or was it just one big?
It was kind of like a camera shake. Like if you look at the screen, I don't know if you can see it, but it kind of jitters. And this is during playback, and this is consistent for all of their cameras. I don't know how well it translates to Zoom, but basically every half second or so, it just kind of jumps up. And can you see that on your screen?
Yeah.
And that's pretty much consistent throughout the whole shareholder meeting.
Yeah, it does look like it's kind of in a pattern. It's not like a shaky camera.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the whole image is going up and down. Does it? Yeah, it does it there too.
And I'm pretty sure they're using PTZs for this, but it was just really bothering me because it was starting to give me a headache after a little bit. So
my off the cuff thought is that they're using PTZ cameras that are 1080i, and that for some reason it's bouncing on the fields. Like that's what it looks like to me, is that it's doing this field bounce. So it's doing some kind of deinterlace or something there, or they're not even deinterlacing, and it's just getting squashed and it's just jumping between fields. It might be too much for a whole field. I don't know, but it does feel like that. It feels like some kind of processing thing. It doesn't feel like to what we talked about before. It doesn't feel like a camera shake. It's literally but when you see that up and down thing, oftentimes that's a field issue. Like it's a 1080i source going into a progressive output, and it's literally grabbing every other field, at some point. So it's not doing it every frame. That's the thing. That's the odd thing there. Other than maybe we can't see it, but yeah, I don't know. It's interesting though, and annoying.
Very.
Even with shareholder meetings, I feel like you should just do audio. If you're gonna do video, you should do it like you should make it a show, especially if you're a big company, because it represents you. Like your brand is represented every time you do something outward. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and Douglas says, when using ProTools, is there any way to make the text size larger in the user interface? I'm trying it out coming from Logic and Studio One, and the text size is hard to read.
Anyone in this group know that? I think you might have to ask an after hours on that one. I don't think we have an answer for you today. Next question.
Next question again from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, I read that Facebook uses IRC, Internet Relay Chat, and Zoom as a backup communication media for their operations teams. For an emergency meeting of that sort, how do you make sure everyone is listenable without a meter or mic check?
I don't think most people worry about meters or mic checks. I mean, and people aren't that listenable. They're just trying to communicate, especially when they're in a behind the scenes. But in most corporate environments, they're not spending that much time on listenability. If you've ever been in a conference call where people are in a conference room, you know that they don't care about the audio. All right, next question.
Gabriel Ung in Malaysia is up next, and Gabriel says, Emirates recently did an ad where the Tlaloc was on top of the Burj. Many thought it was a green screen, which prompted them to release a behind-the-scenes video. What was the thought process to do such a dangerous shot in camera rather than in a studio?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Two reasons why some companies will actually do it. And part of it is prestige, the value to be seen, to be able to afford all of the stunt people and the security and the rigging and all the support systems involved. It's saying we're successful because we've got this money to be able to throw at something like that. The other reason to do it is because it looks damn good.
Clean show. Like really, it's not that doesn't work. I'm not kidding. Nigel.
Yeah, I was really just going to follow on from the point of because they can. I think that, the fact that we all watch the behind the scenes thing is the reason for doing it.
Yeah, it's hard with all the flowing bits and pieces that are there. I just looked at it while we were talking. It's hard to key that really well. It's hard to pull that off with all the interconnection and everything else. It will never look as good as it would on top of things. And it wasn't that dangerous of a shot. They've got rappelling rope, and she's all rigged up. They're still roto, so it's not like it's completely like someone just went to the top of the. So I don't think it was not. I mean, well designed and well organized. It's not that dangerous of a shot, and it's probably cheaper than trying to get it done in post. So that go ahead, Bill.
I wonder two things. I wonder if that's actually an aerialist and not an Emirates flight attendant. So you're very used to being up in those things. But the other thing to me is that I think virality, the fact that you've done that and you've covered it from the rigging of means that the backstory might get actually more attention than the actual ad itself. And in these era of trying to get clicks, that can be its own reward.
Yeah, but it's when you look at the number of shots that are there where she's doing it, all of those shots, you have a white veil, you have a bunch of other things. That would not be a trivial effect shot. Like, it's not, just as someone who's done it, I'd much rather do it in camera than do that with a special effects shot. Next question.
Tony Mobley, Newman, Georgia, is up next. As the Office Hour community members grow their shows, tips for engagement with their audience.
Go ahead, John.
So, Tony, this is a fantastic question. I think engagement is the key of moving forward in broadcast. Nothing's more important. I think it's way more important than cloud production. Interacting with your audience is important. So as those people, they need some sort of way to communicate back to you via chat or communication systems like Mukana, and then acknowledge those people. People like to hear their name. We're working on all kinds of fun games and toys and stuff to do engagement. I think it's absolutely critical.
Liberty?
Plus one, everything that John said of like really calling people's names out. They love that. So that's why it encourages them to ask more questions. And then the chat feature, making sure that just from that polls and things like that help. And again, don't neglect that when you send those emails out that they're engaging or that you're calling people out. Like, there's just different ways to plug them in.
Sky?
Everybody wants to be loved, and that's your way of showing it. You're identifying, you're IDing them, you're saying that they have value. And so to be able to acknowledge them by name is one technique. I also take a cue from Graham Kerr that said at one point he and his wife would sign 20,000 thank you letters, and he would be responding to all of the email. I mean, not this is the hard mail. This is the post. So yeah, that souvenir, that acknowledgement of I see you is critical.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
The three things that come to the top of my mind are consistency, pacing, and keeping your promises. Consistency and be there every day so they can find you. Don't, and keeping your promise is, if you say you're going to be there at 2:00, be there at 2:00. I know too many shows that I go there and I'm waiting for 8 to 10 minutes before the show actually starts. And the pacing, you got to deliver enough information to keep people engaged. I see way too many shows still after this much type of people doing these from home where they just ramble on for the first 8 minutes and there's been no information given that I can use. They're just doing happy talk for no good reason.
Go, Josh.
Yeah, kind of tailing off of Bill's pacing idea. People want to know that being in the show will direct the show. It'll take a different trajectory because they're there. That's where the interaction lies. And so if, as the host, if you're too set on a certain path and you can't pivot or be adjustable to that path, they'll kind of get that and they'll say, yeah, we're pretty much just going to go through the same thing. So having shorter talking segments, kind of like Bill mentioned, and also being able to pivot with wherever you find that the crowd wants to go.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, I learned this in radio a long time ago. My boss used to tell me, you're speaking to someone, you're not talking to everyone. So don't say hello, everybody, when you're engaging. Engage with the individual that's probably sitting there watching you. You're going to have a lot more relevance in your conversation.
As you know, I don't believe in question and answer at all, or audience interaction.
Your nose is growing, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially if you're doing a live show, live shows, as Tony, I'm sure, has found and have we found, is precarious. You're taking on something that could go wrong at any moment. And there's not a lot of ways to hide it or paper over it. There's only 3 reasons, in my opinion, to go live, and that's for sports, news, or interactivity. You got to have one of those 3, and if you don't have one of those 3, don't do it because it's just too risky. And so the interactivity, we've done lots of different ones, but to John, everyone's point here, what I find is if people talk for too long, even in our own show here, if we don't get to questions relatively quickly, I can watch the whole panel getting droopy-eyed and, things start to slow down and everyone's like, okay. Even if it's interesting, it's just that, you want to get into that Q&A as fast as possible. So we're trying to keep on tightening that up. We sometimes fall into 20, 25 minutes of someone talking, but I try to, within 10 or 15 minutes, get to the questions and get people, I do feel it's important to set it up. But I find it funny that I used to think of a setup being the first half hour, and now I think of the setup as like 5 or 10 minutes max. Like we just have to get out of this and get moving. So and at least pepper it with questions of while we're working. And I'm still trying to rethink that for the second hour of how to make sure that actually happens. Next question.
Dennis, looks like Champion Walker in South End on the Sea. I have a Plantronics PC headset speaker switch, which is becoming less reliable in its old age, and it has been discontinued. What hardware do other people use to switch between their headset headphones and the speakers?
I don't know if we have a lot of people who have like an external. I mean, I haven't had a physical phone. I'm trying to think of the last time I had a physical phone. I mean, it was a long time. I'm still thinking like a physical phone with a wire in it that I called. That might have been 25 years ago. So I don't know if I have any reference point. It's been a cell phone for a long time. Yeah, sorry, I don't know if I have an answer for that one. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. Could you see the LUMIX BS1H box camera, a formidable competitor to the Pocket Cinema or Blackmagic Design Studio camera for an ATEM-based streaming setup? And he's got the link there.
Go ahead, Noah.
I think so. There are a lot of good perks, and I'll try to run through my quick list here. So it's a full frame sensor. It's got 10-bit on 4K, a 4K image. It's powered over Ethernet, which are all good things. The things that kind of scare me are the shading software that it comes with. It's called Panasonic PUC software LUMIX Tether for multicam. It's been in beta for 13 months, and I haven't really seen that program before. So they really need to support shading in that side of it. Another negative would be it's a 3G SDI connection instead of a 12G. So that's kind of missing. But the thing that also excites me about this camera is it has a USB-C port. And if Blackmagic and Panasonic were working together to make lenses, they could also offer studio or rear controls that Blackmagic just announced, like the focus demand and the zoom demand over USB-C.
I was really excited when I saw it, but I think that I have the problem for me, and this is the advantage that Blackmagic has, is that I was like, I don't know how I'm going to tie that into an ATEM. like I don't, and so it immediately becomes like I have an ecosystem that it doesn't fit into, and so I think that's going to be the uphill battle for a lot of people as we keep moving forward, is that the entire ecosystem becomes important, and whether it, because shading cameras without an ATEM is brutal. It's like I grew up shading cameras with lots of hardware and things and paint boxes, and so it's not like I don't know how to do it. Like I just hate it. So and the color science that Blackmagic brought to their cameras, I haven't seen the Panasonic one, but the fact that you're using basically resolve interface or light interface inside of the switcher. When it first came out, I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Like I was like so against it because I'm so used to my paint boxes and R minus G and G minus R and B minus G, like all of how can you color correct without that? Now I could never go back. It's so much superior to what, so I was wrong and Grant was right, as he often is. It's a superior system. So we'll see. Next question.
Aaron Giancarelli in Flagstaff, Arizona says, was the Isidora training from After Hours Lab recorded? He missed it and still wants to learn the program.
It wasn't recorded. We're going to keep on just hanging out and working on it and talking amongst ourselves. I'm not going to record them, at least at the beginning. We'll put some together that are more recorded and more organized, but they're really like us. Like, I don't understand why I'm getting video, and I'll be honest, I just don't think it's viewable. Like us just traipsing through it for an hour, that would be a little patch of torture. So I think that I think, and it's torture for me too. I find that I'm different when I'm recorded than when I'm not, and I think that I don't want to do that right now. so I think that's the issue. We're doing another one at noon today for an hour, and we're literally just hanging out and asking questions like, oh, we're trying to do this, and we're trying to do that, and Tlaloc and Andy are there answering questions and talking about different ways of doing things and everything else. And I would just recommend coming. What's going to happen is a bunch of us are going to get good at this. And so these little hacks, you'll just be able to jump in when you're ready to learn it and ask questions. And we'll do them at different times once we get going, once we don't need Andy and Tlaloc to be there to move forward. Right now, we got to kind of find a schedule that works for them. So next question.
Well, it actually follows up on that one. Hasmukh is up from Cape Town. He says Isadora appears to be quite a challenge. Of all the apps mentioned and shown in the lab and office hours, Isadora seems to require a much deeper commitment to learn. Andy and Tlaloc appear as conductors orchestrating beautiful music with Isadora, but is it for the broader group? So it's on the same topic.
I think it is, actually. I think that I think nodal programming is a huge, opportunity. And as someone who's done a lot of nodal compositing and nodal, I used to sell a nodal system. It's really powerful, and the hump is the first. Like, there is this huge mountain of understanding how it works at the very first couple hours of using it. And then after that, you just start figuring out, okay, I'm going to drop this in, I'm going to put this in. And especially if we have a group like this that can trade notes, I would highly recommend getting into it. It is so powerful. I'm getting clear of all the crazy stuff that I can do with it. And it's actually easier to look at than a lot of other things, because you can look at the notes. Like, what does it do? Okay, I did this. So that you can back channel through it. I do find the interface in Isadora could probably use a modernization, but it's I would recommend playing with it. Yeah,
could you do a quick 411 on what nodal versus what versus other?
Yeah, so
it's an interface.
Yeah, a nodal interface is, you have, instead of having something that's linear, like this is going to go to this and this is going to go to this, or a layer based, that these are, or rules based or interface based. Nodal is, I've just got raw data. I've got, here's a source, and I've got this, but I can take this source and I can split it among 6 different things, do different operations, and have them all come back together again. So you've got different plot lines. You got a plot line that says we're going to do this, and another plot line that goes down here, and this is happening at the same time. And meanwhile, and we're going to do this over here, and you're going to take all this information. And so you've got all these different plots going together, and they all come out with a pretty picture. That's the end of the story, and so you're telling a story with all these you really are telling a story from the source all the way through, and there's all these other things that have to happen to that source. But what you're not connected to, when you get used to a nodal approach, you don't get caught up in, like, how do I handle the layers, or how do I pre-composite this, or how do I, there's all these artifice that we add to what we do, again, pre-compositing our layers, doing all these weird grouping operations, everything else. We do that because we don't have nodes. So when you have nodes, you can do all these other things, and you don't think about whether you have to group them together or not. You just send them all the same signal. Yeah. So yeah, and loopback is another good example of those. But it's also like the synthesizers that we have here, that they're all just, I'm wiring this signal to that signal and this signal to that signal. And it's one of the reasons I was really interested in getting into the synthesizers, was I realized how connected they are to that, and having that thought process. And it's just 1 inch away from programming, and you can build very, very complex. I mean, like when I was doing composites, I would have hundreds of nodes, that are there describing a composite, and I could never do that in After Effects. I mean, like, it would be suicide, and so you just, that's the thing it's super powerful, and we see it in Fusion, we see it in Isadora,
Nuke,
we see it in synthesizers, Nuke, all those things, and it's there because it's super powerful. Next question.
Next one comes from Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany, and he says, is there a direct way to bring an iPad into a Microsoft Teams meeting as a graphic tablet to doodle and draw? It's easy with Zoom, but with Microsoft, I have my difficulties.
Go ahead, John.
So this is kind of Rube Goldberg, but it works. I use Procreate on the iPad, and I composite it with Chroma, and then I bring that into OBS. I use NDI, and then NDI feeds into MS Teams. They do support virtual cam drivers, and so you're able to chroma out the writing and then bring that into Teams. Works.
Good, Nigel.
Yeah, I do it through same process, but using Ecamm Pro. So do it like you would do from Zoom. For this session, create a virtual camera, use Ecamm, and send it into Teams.
Yeah, and you could do that also with an ATEM. So either hardware or software, something that's going to do all the work for you before it gets in there. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next with, what hardware pad-based controllers do you prefer? He's tried the Novatron Launchpad Pro Mark III, but did not like the firmness of the pads.
I don't know anybody here who's using a lot of launch pads. You might have stumped us on that one. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back again. This time he says, Leo mentioned in After Hours that in many cases, the sheer scale of the technology behind an event, concerts, for example, can attract audiences. As we develop these innovative workflows, do we need to think more about content quality versus the likelihood versus fills or flash?
Go ahead, Bill.
In my experience, here's the thing, you get a new piece of technology and it has a lot of bells and whistles, a lot of special effects, a lot of flash. You tend to want to learn that. So you tend to dive into it and tend to overuse them in the early days. The more time you have with something, it's like what I think of as piano players. You're going to stop thinking about pressing the keys and just play the music. And I think the use of these tools becomes like that. The better you get to know the tool and command it, the less you try to do with it and the more intent you have with your art. And I think that's where you get really good.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
If it bleeds, it leads. Big giant headlines that was done in the print media. Everybody likes a train wreck because we have to stop and watch a thing that happened. And as a species, we have a fight or flight thing that the brightest and fastest is what's going to attract us. What you're asking, I think, in your question is a story. That is what what I think you're talking about. And so how do we present it? Do we need a lot of flash and bang? Not necessarily, but it could help move the story forward.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I think initially those things can be, catch your attention, but will they hold your attention? That's the key. Typically, as technology becomes to become commonplace, you want to hide the complexity of the technology, and people they appreciate the show. They couldn't point out exactly why they like it, but they appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're moving towards it very slowly, where we figured out the content first, of exactly how we wanted to do that and how we wanted to work on it. Now we're in the process of, and we have done some around the we've got a lot of really good cameras set up. Everyone looks really good in their frame, and so we've done a lot of the conservative kind of like, how do we build that community? How do we build that piece there? And then the next step will be to make it look a little shinier, and that's mostly to show it to people who don't understand, that just conversation is really what we're up to there. But I think that in the long term, you want to build long-term relationships. I mean, it's just a way more stable, way to work, fast to flash, fast to fall, so, like, and things, that's that whole, people can have this huge audience and it can just dissipate in a second, and you just need to, you want to build that trust and connection that you're going to produce something great. And I think a lot of us think, oh, I did it for a month and it didn't work. Well, you look at these YouTubers and TikTokers and you look at the, years that they did it for 100 people or 500 people or whatever. I mean, the reason that they're really big is they were willing to nug through an enormous amount of low exposure to get to that high exposure. And a lot of them produce great content to get there, and they have a very, very dedicated audience because of it. Next question.
Next question from Douglas Carmichael says, does anyone put environment...
Bo Cordell.
Bo Cordell, I'm sorry, yeah. Charleston, South Carolina. Does anyone put environmental sensors and or GPS tracking devices on fly pack kits?
Yeah, we have. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was going to say, I started using the little Apple AirTags, and I got one as a gift, and I added a couple more. But the funny thing is, it keeps telling me I'm stalking my wife every time we go someplace together. So my point of this is that I don't, and she's stalking me in return. The point of this is I don't think the technology at that consumer level, consumer device that's simple to use, is quite robust enough now for that. Although if I did ship a camera, I would put one in there. Why not? There's no downside to tossing it in and watching where it goes.
Yeah, I believe that what we've used a couple of them. We definitely put them in our trucks. So we had them, like that was the first thing that we did is we put them in the truck. So we always knew where the trucks were. And that was just useful. It was less about anything other than it allowed us to know the progress of the truck without bothering the driver. It wasn't any trust issue or anything else. It was just like, we just look up at a web page and just see, oh, they're here. I don't know which ones we use there. We did start putting some GPS trackers into our cases at times as well. so that we could. And again, it's been a couple of years since I've had to ship things, and I would have to go back and look for the brand. They're great. You could see that, they're sitting in Heathrow sometimes when they weren't supposed to be there. Like I'm in Frankfurt, and I could tell, what was funny was I had one where I had a lost bag, and they said, we don't know where it is. And I said, I know where it is. It's in, and I told them where it was, and that kind of freaked them out that I knew it. I mean, I knew within 30 feet of where my bag was. I was like, I was in Frankfurt and it was in Heathrow, and I was like, and I knew my bag, and they're like, we don't know where it is. Well, let me help you. And I just showed them on the map. It's in this building, and so but you can, the cheap way to do that, by the way, is you just leave your phone with a battery in the glove compartment under everything, and we've even had, I had a friend that did that, but he wired up the lightning connector and put it so that he cut a hole in the glove compartment, took an old iPhone that he just left on, find my iPhone. And he just plugged it in and just left it way behind everything else in the glove compartment. And then he just had a tracker for his car. And it was just an old phone. It didn't cost very much for him to do it. And since he already had it, it'd be an expensive way to do it if you didn't already own the phone. Go ahead, Stuart.
I have an even cheaper way for you. It's called a GPRS Sorry, I had to pause. I saw the size of the cup, and now I want coffee. But GPRS tracker. They're a little like USB stick size device. You put a SIM card in one end. They work via the cell system, so they're not GPS accurate. However, you can dial it, and it has a microphone, so you can listen to the conversations that are going on around your missing thing. They're ideally meant for cars and like that sort of stuff, but they're quite useful.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says the company Sonalysts, that's hard to say, Sonalysts, I guess, mentioned a hard rocker and a Navy admiral as an example of the cross-fertilization that occurs within their walls. Would a well-managed studio help foster such relationships?
I don't understand what they're referring to, but having a wide variety of folks that can work together is useful. Next question.
Moving on, Stefan Fischer of Würzburg, Germany is up next, and he says, is there a way to use Mukana on servers that are physically in Germany? Due to the European data protection regulations, some organizations like school insist on data only on German servers.
Yeah, that'd be a piece of cake. Yeah, not an issue at all. If you can reach out to me if you want to talk more about that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next again, and he says, has anyone ever used Ableton's link technology to synchronize software hardware in the studio or live? What have your experiences been with it versus conventional MIDI sync?
We have used that, and if I remember correctly, I think we used it in a concert that I worked on recently, and it was a little bit difficult because of clocking issues. I think that the clocking issues were, and I can't remember whether it was MIDI or Link, but I'm pretty sure it was Link. And it was just that it didn't take a clock very well. It wanted to be the clock. So, and that turned out to be kind of an issue for what we were trying to do. Next question.
Chris Widener of Lafayette, Indiana says, for the Rode Go 2, what adapter is best for using an XLR handheld mic?
I don't know. We've been using we've been using the Rode Go, and we've been using with the of course like the small electret mics, so like the Pile and stuff like that work with it. And I haven't used an XLR with it, or has anyone? I guess no one here has. Yeah, we're getting stumped a lot today. Go ahead, Bill.
I wonder, often those little ones use little electret condenser mics that have a little bit of bias voltage to them. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the Rode Go does that, but if it does, and you're just plugging in a standard XLR dynamic mic, you're not going to get very much of a signal there. And I don't know whether it would see that and is agile enough to get the level boosted up. I would definitely test before you try to just get a mini pin to XLR adapter and plug it in and expect it to work out of the box.
Yeah.
Test.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, Hasmukh mentioned in After Hours that he considers himself strong in executing ideas, but less so in conceiving them. Have you ever seen successful pairings of conceptualizers with executors in our or other industries?
Charles?
The best one I've seen is Steve Jobs and Tim Cook. For a long time, Tim Cook was just logistics in the background, and trying to finagle and manage such massive pipelines of hardware and resourcing the things that they need so they can create this magical device that Steve is conceiving in his mind. It's been amazing. So that's the A team that I've seen.
Go ahead, Sky. Oh, are you there? Oh, we lost him. Go ahead, Bill.
I think Charles is on exactly the right thing, but I think it was more the two Steves. I think it was Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Wozniak was the executor. Jobs was the conceptualizer. And I think if you take either of the two out of that equation, you don't get what that company became. Somebody had to actually do it.
I'd say for every person who is conceptualizing something, you need about 10 people who are executing it. So that's about the right ratio, maybe 100 that are executing it. And the mistake that a lot of people make is that they want to put a lot of founders and innovators, that have all these crazy ideas. They want to surround people with people just like them. And then what they end up with is a lot of politics and chaos. It's just, because everyone's got, those people also have strong ideas and they have strong opinions and they get upset about this and they want to push hard, and you put too many of them in one place and they just don't go anywhere. They just argue. And so you do need some people who say, I'm not, like and that can evolve too. When I started doing working on movies, I could never think of a script. Now I think of scripts every day. Like, oh, that would be a really fun or a funny scene. That'd be a funny scene. And so it can change how that works as well. But it is you do want. I surround myself personally with as many people who are really good at getting things done, and some I like to partner with people who have good ideas, but I need people who are going to come up with a creative idea to execute on something that we're working on. But if I had too many other people, and a lot of them come up with great creative concepts, but if I had too many people that were coming up with one every 10 minutes, it would be hard to get anything actually executed. Go ahead, Noah.
There's a book called Rocket Fuel that talks about this dynamic between an integrator, which is the person kind of executing, right, and the visionary, who's the person thinking of the idea. And so it's kind of like a yin and a yang principle where they play off each other. But to Alex's point, like the execution is more so of the need, I think.
And oftentimes, again, you can shift gears. Like there's many companies, if I'm working with an ad agency that has a bunch of ideas, I don't come up with them. Like I don't have any ideas. What do you want to do? Let me show you how to do it. And I try to make that great and be innovative in that area. But I also know where I am in the food chain, So, and sometimes the food chain is I'm there to give them good ideas, and sometimes I'm there to execute it. And so and the better you can get at knowing where you belong in that area, the more you'll get along with a lot of folks. Let's go to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next. He says Panasonic will be providing a software development kit to control the BS1H via USB or Ethernet. If you could intercept the shading commands from the ATEM, could you conceivably translate those commands into those the LUMIX can understand?
Go ahead, Stuart.
To be frank, I would not be surprised if it supports that from the box, like from the get-go. What that camera really says is that Panasonic is 100% behind the Micro Four Thirds mount and has more lenses coming. And from the production cameras we've seen launched earlier this year, we know that that's a high probability. Yeah, I would honestly think that BMD and Panasonic would be sharing technology at this stage to make sure their products work well with each other's product.
BMD's version of this is, I don't know how old now, 5 or 6, 7 years old. I'd be really surprised if we don't see a new camera that goes head to head with this one. I think that I do think there's probably some collaboration between Panasonic and BMD, but I don't know if it'll be in the camera tech. Next question.
We're getting real specific, and those of you who are into music and recording, this will be fun. What type of reverb do the floor tom blasts on the intro to Paul Simon's Boy in the Bubble sound like?
I have no idea. That one's over the top. Next question.
Okay, Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says Zoom apps. Many of them have limited integration with Zoom, except being displayed in the configuration window. Are there any Zoom apps that are worth installing?
I haven't seen any yet that I need. so that I haven't. They're kind of to your point. They bring you more information. One thing I would like to do in the not too distant future is put the panelist information into it, so we don't have to have two windows open. So maybe we'll do it. Build you one that you want to install. So we're working on that. Next question.
Alex Forty Goldner, our friend in London, has a question about monitors. He's asking if anyone has good examples of 24-inch 4K monitors that go well with the M1 Mac Mini.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I just made an investment in two of them. I'm using the HP Z as in Z24F G3. It's a 1080 monitor. It's a 24-inch monitor. It's also rotatable. Works great. I can't. I'm sure there's tons of them out there, but this one just happens to be one that I selected, and I'm having great luck with it.
For a long time, my 24-inch monitors have been Dells. The cost of the Dells is that the latency is a little higher, and the gaming ones from Asus have been, they have a lower latency, in how they work, and they also rotate. So they're gaming ones, but I don't know. I have so many Dell 24 inches, and part of it is that I get into a habit of, once I start buying them, if they're not broken, I won't buy different ones, because then I have to. I don't like mixing and matching how they work. And so I've been buying. I probably bought 200 Dell monitors in the last 4 years. So they're all the same. So then again, one of the requirements that I have with them is that they have to have a Visa mount on the back. They cannot have a power supply, external power supply. They have to be a C13 NEMA connection, and they have to obviously have HDMI. And those are the things that, and some of them don't. You get ones with DisplayPort. You're like, what am I supposed to do with this? So anyway, but those three things are the most important things for me. I wouldn't say that the color reproduction is great. I have a Dell right here connected to my Mini, so my M1 Mini. So, but it's not. I wouldn't give it to Charles and ask him to color correct with it. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I have an HP Z27, and I can't say enough about it. It's really great.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic. Next question.
And the last one in our regular queue at this point in time is Douglas Carmichael's. And he says, with conversations with Tony Mobley and the Hybrid Ministries Forum utilizing Mukana, is it time to create an Office Hours Global Network brand encompassing not only office hours, but the content spun off from office hours?
At some point, yes. I think we have to figure out what that actually means, and I think that I want to give people also the freedom to do what they're going to do and not feel people have found that if I know that we feel very relaxed, but if we start really putting our brand on it, then I will be much more controlling about things. And, because I'll worry about the brand. I tend to, the gears in my head change very, very fast, and so we would, I think that we'll be careful of that. We definitely want to promote other members who are doing shows. So we're going to try to get that scheduled into it. I'm going to work with Ken on that, and we're going to try to, get stuff in there where people know what other people that are members of our community are doing, to make sure people know about it, but not necessarily under the brand, because I want to leave them with the freedom to, do what they want to do with their show. But we also want to support it. So we're pushing, we are making available Mukana to a handful of folks that are already kind of core members they've been on the panel, they've been in the group for a long time, and we're having them test Mukana and giving us feedback on it. So we're going to keep going down that path. All right. It is time to shift gears. Very excited about this. This started as kind of an idea, do you think we could do this? I mean, I don't know, months ago. And, Charles was like, yeah, we can do this. And so we started going back and forth. And the idea was really that, of course, we can shade cameras with our switcher. And that's what we've been doing. Before that, we were using paint boxes. So we had you have 8 paint boxes in front of you, and you're sitting there shading the cameras and coloring the cameras. And what you do is you put up a chart, and you get all the cameras lined up to that chart one at a time. And you put them in front of scopes. And there's a couple of things that don't work about that. One is you can't really, it's really hard to give them all a certain color. Like if you want them to be a little warmer, or a little cooler, or green, or whatever you decide creatively you want to do, then all of your systems are really hard to deal with in a shading environment. So then you have to match two cameras together. You get one that looks just the way you want it, then you bring another camera in, and it's very cumbersome to do that with two cameras and the chart and everything else. It takes a long time, to make that work. So one of the things that Charles and I started talking about is, why don't we just send you a bunch of charts and have you just make the cameras all look the same? And so it's in addition to matching a bunch of cameras, it is also talking about, and I'll let Charles dig into this in a second, but it is also something that you can use to correct your cameras. And remember, one of the, just if you have a single camera, I just want it to look like this. So what Charles is showing you is also a pattern for how you can create a look for yourself, even if it's one camera. He's using a chart, but you could also use the same process that he's using to just build a great LUT for your camera. And remember that you can have LUTs in boxes. So one of the things we did recently is we had to match an F55 to our Blackmagic cameras. Well, we ran the F55 through a LUT box so that we could apply the LUT on the way through, so that it would convert the, now we're able to match. If you're able to get those cameras through a LUT, you're able to match cameras that are different manufacturers and so on and so forth. Back into it. So anyway, so that's kind of the setup. Charles, I'll let you take it away.
Hello, everybody. So yeah, going back to shading cameras, when I was first introduced to that was way before we had log or raw. We had just Rec 709. So you're already working in that same color space. So shading was great because you just could shift the lift, like the shadows, or like the gamma in the middle, or the gain, like the highlights, and just get the image to where you want it. You didn't have to worry too much about changing a color space or tonal values. Like you were sort of in the ballpark, and now you're fine-tuning to get it just the way that you want it, creatively the way that you want. Now that most cameras shoot raw and log, now it becomes a thing. Trying to get us from a scene referred space, right?
Can you tell people what a scene referred space is?
Yeah, so scene referred is essentially what you see at the scene that the camera is capturing on set, right? That is scene referred. Whatever the sensor is capturing there in log and raw, that is scene referred, right? Now remember, after you capture on the sensor, everything else after that is math. You're not changing what you captured. It's just math and transformations to get you to where you want to be creatively. That's essentially what it is. Now you have scene referred and you have display referred. And display referred is what we conceive for delivery. Let's say like a Rec 709, which is what most TVs used to be. And P3 now, which is what most Apple products are doing. And in the future, let's say we'll get to Rec 2020, which is a much larger color space. And it's getting closer to what our eyes can actually see, because we could capture a lot of colors that we cannot reproduce. And that's been the issue, reproducing the colors consistently. That's the issue. That's why for the longest time we had Rec 709, because we know how to reproduce that. And most monitors now that everybody has can actually reproduce it. So we're in a good place. Now certain companies like Apple are pushing the boundaries to get us more colors, a broader space to work in, which is their DCI P3. Past that, not many monitors at all can reproduce past that. Like for example, I have a Flanders Scientific, and I can reproduce past P3, but not Rec 2020, because right now there's no monitor that can actually do Rec 2020. And that has to do with your primaries for red, blue, green. There are talks, and this is going on in the background that I'm excited about. Instead of a 3 primary process, we will be moving eventually to a 6 primary process. It's gonna take some time. but from a creative point of view and what you'll be able to recreate, it's going to be amazing. But that's in white paper mode right now. It's being developed, so it's going to be great. What I wanted to show you guys today was a quick process to just, if you're shooting in log, to get your camera and balance it out with the chart, just so that you could get comfortable with the process. The more that you do this, the more comfortable you get. In the beginning, it seems like it's going to break your brain. Like you have to deal with nodes and then transfer functions, and then what color space are you going to deliver to? Did you shoot in this? What is it going out to? You're coming from scene referred to display referred. And there's a lot of stuff in between that where things can go really wrong. And then you'll spend hours trying to figure out what hole did you get yourself into. So let me start my resolve real quick. In the background, one thing that I would say about LUTs is that you need to know what color space you're coming from and where you're going. A LUT is like a bridge from here to there. But if you don't know where you're coming from and where you're going, you can't just get a LUT off of the internet and then expect it to work. It's going to break something.
Right. And it really is the LUT is a lookup table. It's a 3D curve. You know, like, so if you think about the curves in Photoshop and you pull up your curve or push it down, it's saying I've got inputs and outputs, and I'm now pulling how that's going to happen. And a LUT does that across 3 dimensions. And so you basically are taking, as Charles said, you need to understand, I'm going in from here and out to here, but it's transforming the colors. And so if you don't know what's going in, you're transforming them from, it's like having directions of how to get to Pittsburgh. They're different from Philadelphia than they are from Toledo. It's like there's different set of directions to get there.
Yeah. Now I will show you. Now we're going to go into Fusion as well, just to get a visual representation of what it is that 3D Cube looks like and what it's doing to an image,
right,
pre-LUT and after LUT. But first, let me share my. Let me move this over here. Okay, I'm going to share my Resolve screen. Okay, can everybody hear me and see my Resolve screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Excellent. Yes. Right, so these are charts I received from Alex. These are all the same camera with all the same lenses, but intrinsically, each camera sensor is going to have some variations. It's inevitable. It is what it is. And especially with the lenses, you combine that with the sensor in particular, now you have multitudes of variations, and you have to try and manage that the best that you can. Now most colors will fall within the range that you're expecting. And if you're not too concerned about small drifts, then you're going to be okay. But to get things right, especially from where I'm coming from, where I need to know that a certain color is a certain color, and especially I obsess about a gray, because a gray is a simple color to be able to measure, right? So let's say, right, you shoot your chart, right? Now, one thing that you have to say, a chart is a 2D plane. So I would normally have my chart next to the person or a talent or somebody that has a similar skin tone to the talent that is going to be there, because things will shift a little bit. But for the purposes that we have now, this will get you in the right direction, so you could use these techniques to get you to where you want to be. So for example, we have a chart. Inside of Resolve, we can use the color chart. This will be the easiest way for you to get your colors in the place where you want them to be. This chart is a Chroma Dumont chart. It's one of the best charts. It does come at a price, but you get what you pay for, and they are worth the money.
I mean, having one or having a friend with one is very important.
Exactly.
And then the main thing with once you have one, by the way, the care of them is you keep them in a case all the time. Like they'll last longer than their quote unquote expire date, but you do want to keep them out of the light.
Exactly. With things that you spend money on and you invest, you want to take care of them. You have them a long time. Okay, so here we are. Okay, so we have all these little chips colors, and especially the grays, very important.
And by the way, one note here, if anyone's looking at getting one of these charts, if this is a 24 R, you need to the 24, not the 28 or 12, which I found out because those charts aren't represented inside of Resolve.
Yeah, which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
But this is one of the best charts you can get. They're pricey, but Alex is doing a lot of big productions, so this is what he needs, right? For regular video, this is a bit overkill, but for large productions, this is where you want to be.
They make small ones too. You don't have to get one as big as that one is. This one here that I have is much smaller than that one was. Yeah, and this is a 24.
Yeah, it's sizable.
Yeah. But this one fits in a carry-on. That's why it's this size.
Oh, nice. All right. So what we have here, right. So this was shot in Blackmagic, either film or the 4.6K film. Now we could try both and see where we stand, and this will give you a good baseline for where you want to be. Now you can see here, it's asking you what target gamma and color space you're going to. And for most people, you're going to a Rec 709 because that's what you're going to be putting out. Mm-hmm. So that's a good place to start.
And it is important that because there's that when you're doing the Blackmagic design film, is that version 4 that you have it set to right now?
It doesn't say here,
okay,
which is something that they are going to be adding. This is one of the things about Blackmagic where you get a lot of great stuff for a really low price, but there are some things that you'll have to work around, and this is one of them.
The reason is that the color space that jumped between 4 and 5 was dramatic.
Yes.
So if you have to know, and I think 5 is running only on the 12 Gs. I don't know if it runs on the other ones or not. Maybe the G2s.
I believe you're right. Yeah, I believe you're right.
Yeah.
So real quick, once you have this, let's just hit match. I have mine set to 6500K. Mm-hmm. And that's because, and I'll show you in a second, this will give me a pretty balanced look to start with. Now, let's say if you set this to 5600, you're going to see what happens once we rematch. Things get very warm, right? And you can see that in the chart here. Now, I'm going to be moving the chart in a second just because we're going to be using it, but it gets very warm. So I found doing this process, the 6500, and that's the way that my room is set up, actually, that this gives me a bit more of a neutral look, right? So since this node is doing a transformation from the gamma that you shot in, which was scene referred, to display referred, right? This is going to be considered your ODT, your output device transform, right? So we're going to name this ODT, right? So that's what we have there. We're going to create another node before this, and to do that in Resolve, the quick command is Shift S, right? So now we have another node that we could place over here. Now that we have that, we're going to use this to zoom. So we're going to name this Zoom and place the chart as big as possible on the screen. And we will stretch it out just a bit, just to fill the screen with just the colors in the gray chart. And I'll tell you why in a second, right? So in Resolve, say we go all the way to here, to sizing. Now I go to my input sizing and I go to node sizing. Once I'm there, I start to push up and I try to fill the screen as much as I can, right? So once we're there, and once we're there, I actually will stretch this out. And I do that because I only want my scopes to be looking at this. I only want to be paying attention to this, and this is what I want.
And can you corner pin in this? I don't think you can corner pin in the node.
No, you can skew, and it would be
Mhm.
nice if you could corner pin, because a lot of the shots
'Cause
that
I-
we get sometimes it's sideways, and
Yeah, so because sometimes what I do is what I've been playing with is corner pinning in the timeline. Just because I have that control there, right? And
Right.
then I pull those in, and again, if you're also matching these one chart to the other to see how it's working, having them all stretched so that all their corners are the same is super useful.
it is extremely useful. Now that we're here, you can see in the waveform, right? So we're going to focus on this X, which is just a grayscale, right? And you can see here, there's some deviation. The greens are a little low, the reds are overlapping a little bit, the greens are a little high over here. It's not as balanced as you would like, and you could see that in the chart. If you go change your tool, qualifier, and you right click and say show picker RGB values, it'll give you the values of those pixels. Now there is inherent noise in the footage, so as you move you can see how balanced or unbalanced you are. Now if you go here, you can see,
And these are all gray, so they should be gray.
Should be
All those
within,
numbers should be equal. Whatever the number is, it should
exactly.
be equal.
Right, and you can see here our greens are a little higher than our red and our blues, right? And then here our reds are much higher, right? So you could see that actually represented in the chart, and you could see the small 3 circles that you see here on the waveform. That is a part of the issue that we're going to try and tackle, just to balance that as best as you can within the time that you have. Usually I have a bit of extra time to actually try get to balance these things. So I will get a pretty good base for this particular chart, and then we'll repeat the process for all the other clips for all the other cameras.
And by the way, if you're looking at this chart and you went and searched and said, well, that's way more than I want to spend, remember that there's also X-Rite makes a series of charts. The one that you see there, that little basic one, the X-Rite Color Checker Classic. And those come in all kinds of different sizes and prices. I mean, they're still in the $150 to $200 range, but you can definitely get, to do the that kind of auto setting. You can find ones that are less expensive than the DSC Labs. It's just a really good one.
Yeah. Now I see that my highs are a little low, so I'm gonna, and I will try not to use my panel that's in front of me because I'm inherently always putting my hands on the panel, but let's use the GUI for now. So I'm gonna lift my gain just a bit, just so that I'm using a bit more of the full extent of the color space that we have available. And I'm gonna bring up my shadows just a bit because I don't wanna completely have my blacks be completely black, because I'm gonna give this to somebody else and I want them to have some wiggle room. I don't wanna clip anything beforehand because then they won't be able to recover that on their end. So I have to be mindful of that. Okay, so next step, right? This was a little levels. Next, we're gonna make another node and going forward downstream, that is option S. I didn't say that before. And here we're gonna do some curves, right? So curves be right here in your panel. Now, doing this on one screen gets a little tricky, but we're gonna make it work. Massive curves, we're gonna place this right here. Shrink this down a little bit. Right, so at this point, I'm a bit less concerned by looking at the chart in the screen. I'm looking at the chart in my waveform and I'm seeing what's wrong with it, right? So there's a couple of things. So let's say I want to manage this right now. As you can see, when I clicked on that, it made a point right there. And this is going from pure black to pure white, but we're in the middle. As you can see here from waveform, we're in the middle. So that's what we're going to be working with. Now I'm going to ungroup my colors because I want to work with them individually. So I would probably put, let's say, let's start with our green. Our green looks a little out of place, right? So I would start there. I would start to put some points around that, and I would try, and as I grab this, like, see what's happening over here. You got to find where that point is. And this is a slow process. You want to do this playing music, having a good time, because this.
Do you have a name for this part of the process?
I'm trying to neutralize that chart. And here, we're going to take another step just to make it a little easier on the eyes. Let's move these nodes down over here. Let's make another one after our zoom. And we're going to call this grayscale, right? And we're going to let's move these down, and we're going to make a mask around just our grayscale, just so that we can see just that, no distractions, no nothing, right? There's a mask, but we're not seeing the result of it. Now that is because we need to add an alpha output, and you see this little blue thing that's up here? That's your output, and I'm going to connect that to the output of that node. And now that we have that, we just focus on the grayscale. And this is something that you can turn on and off by clicking on the node number right here. Right? So let's continue with, so go back to our curves and continue to do the same process for each color.
And Charles, I'm going to let you know that we've got like 24 questions. So what we'll do is we'll just another 8 minutes or so, and then we'll jump into some questions.
Yep. Okay. So this process, as you start to balance this, right? I'm going to close all these. We're going to speed this up. Right. So once you have this, right, let's turn this node off. Bam. Okay. So once you have this, if you wanted to apply that grade from this one to this, you could just center click where you have this selected on this. Now, the only problem with that is that it's not going to match. And now you will see the inherent differences in those two shots. And you could see it in the chart here. You could see that same grade that we applied here is not working here. So you would just go through the same process in trying to apply that there. Now, due to time constraints, we're going to move this along. I wanted to show you so you can visualize what these things look like in 3D, because we've been staring at a 2D look of what these things are in a waveform or anything, but a 3D cube is another thing to visualize. Now let's go over here. This is Fusion. Fusion can get a little hairy at times for many people, especially, as Alex knows, if you're getting into nodal compositing, it can do magic. I'm just going to set this up real quick. If anybody has questions about Fusion, we could go into it another time. So this is a visual representation of a 3D 33-point cube would be. Now, these points would move in accordance to whatever LUT you are pushing through that system. Now, there's also 17 points. And these sort of went out of style a little bit because as you apply these, they do create breaks in the image because there's just not enough data to completely take the image from where you want to where you want to be. You could do 33, but even if you look at 65, right? Now we're talking. But most cameras won't take a 65-point cube. So that's a part of the issue that we have. So quick, I'm going to change this back to 33 just for processing purposes. And this is an ARRI clip shot in ARRI log C. And I've applied just an ARRI log C to Rec 709 LUT. And you can see
so what was straight, you know, when it's what you saw before, when it's just a pure cube, that is the colors going in are going to be exactly the same as the colors going out. As you start to pull these in 3D, you're basically saying the colors are going to come in, but they're going to come out a little, the greens are going to come out darker or, you know, lower, less green or you know, in each one of those channels, they're going to, but it's happening not in a curve like what you just saw, but in a 3D space where the RGB is the 3 dimensions.
Yes. Now, one quick thing that I want to show you before we just get to the questions. If you want to visualize exactly what this image looked like before, this is what the image is represented as inside that cube as log. Right? Once we apply this, we push to this. And this gives you a clearer look about what is actually happening inside of that cube. Now, that being said, we're going to get over to the questions and I will stop sharing. There's a lot of information to cram.
That's good though. It's good.
So,
and you know, we'll this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of it. So we just want to
yeah, this is just to get us acquainted to the process of thinking scene referred, display referred, where are you coming from,
right.
Where are you going, what is your goal? And aside from balancing it, once you balance, do you want to have a creative look that you could apply to this? And we'll have different sessions for this and we can have discussions, but it's a slippery slope and there is no bottom to this. So once you start asking questions, you're going to end up being a color scientist.
And that's what we'd like to, you know, and again, really understanding what we're doing, whether it's an audio or video or LUTs or everything else is kind of the game, you know, and the more of us that know it, the more we can continue to support ourselves. So don't, if this is way too deep, don't worry about it. There's some of us are going to get some of it. We got Charles. so anyway, first question is coming in from Juan C. Robles from Mexico City. And he said, what are the best practice for lighting and placing the color chart?
Okay. So I would, if you're doing a creative look, get your lights where you want to focus on the subject. It's going to be a person, a thing, whatever. Light them and get the chart next to their head. Have them hold it because it's going to be the best representation of what the light is going to fall off. And light falls off very quickly. So you want to make sure that you have them in the place that they're going to be and the lights as you wish, and then you want the chart as close to that spot in XYZ space as possible, and then you can correct that. Because the main thing that you want to go for is the skin tones,
right,
and color correct the chart, but focus on your skin tones.
Well, and one of the ways to go backwards from this has been in some scenes, what we do is we get the scene to exactly where we want it. We get the person to look exactly the way we want them to look, and then we put the chart in. And because then what we're doing is we're matching the chart. We're matching the other cameras using the chart. We're matching, this is the color that I wanted, as opposed to this is accurate color. It's the look and feel that was wanted as far as matching goes. Next question is from Hasmukh Gajar in Cape Town. Charles asked me this question: do you have any clips of talent holding a color chart? Since a 6K is facing the talent and the second 6K is facing the work surface, what will be the what will be the best work for you to on how the clip is taken? Must the clip be equal to the live setup?
Okay, so I would do 2 clips, because if you have 2 different cameras, one is for the hands on the kitchen or on the chopping block, would get the talent, shoot them with the chart, and then also get the second card and put their hands in the scene and use their other hand to hold the chart. So that way you have a good balance of what their skin tone is and the chart with the lighting that you've given to that second camera in that scene as you've framed it. And then you go from there.
Yeah, and one of the things that we do a lot is do these cameras on their own, in that scene, either in the scene that we're in or even evenly lit, because what we're really managing is the transform of color through the lens, and so that you can change other things in the cameras later, but you want to get that kind of accurate view there. Next question is from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. He says, what is the most efficient workflow for processing, editing S-Log2 footage? Do you grab it first in Resolve, then edit it in Premiere, Final Cut, etc.?
Okay, so usually when I receive a rough cut, I will get a file, or let's say like an XML and the raw clips, and I will then just grade what's been cut and edited already. So I will come later in the pipeline. Usually the edit needs to be approved by different people. If you're doing the whole process yourself, I would stick to something similar. If you're going from S-Log, do a simple space color transformation inside of Resolve, and go and get, do a color space transform from Sony S-Log2 to whatever you're going to be delivering in. If it's Rec 709, let's say Gamma 2.4, do that as your base, and that'll get you pretty close. Each manufacturer has all these LUTs available for you to be able to get from their log to a Rec 709 on their website. So use that as your base, and then you can edit to that, and then you can go back and do a creative look after that. If you need to be showing your client in progress edit and they need to see a rough look.
Wansi Robles said, thinking in virtual production, Unreal, is coloring necessary for the virtual cameras?
I think it depends on the creative intent of the project. Now in virtual, are you going to be delivering in Rec 709 or let's say in HDR, right? And all those things that you have to keep in mind. Now, the main thing that you would grade or color to, if you have talent that are humans, is their skin tone. That's the most important thing. Outside of that, things can be forgiven, but if your skin tones are off, the viewer will inherently know something is not right. And after that, it's a lost cause.
There are many things that are just easier to fix in color than it is to try to get the 3D scene to do what you want it to do. You decide you want an overall hue, and it might be just easier to do it there than try to figure out the lighting math to make that work in the program. Wansi Robles says also, can we have some sample files to practice creating LUTs? Yeah, we'll work on that.
Yeah, and also if you want to, a lot of the manufacturers, Blackmagic, Ari, have sample footage on their website so you can download for free and just start playing. That's the best thing to do.
And I've got an X-Rite and the 24R, obviously. And so I'm going to shoot some more stuff that we can actually distribute that we can put up there. So we'll do that in the next probably week or so. Next question is from Wansi Robles again. He said, when coloring for streaming, is it better to create LUTs for all video chain or segment it as to have one LUT for the equipment and another for the streaming service?
Streaming and grading can get very complicated. Alex will tell you about that. There can be a gamma shift or a slight color shift depending on the hardware. So what I would do is try to get your chain set and grade to the final image that the viewer is going to see. That's what you want to do. Okay, you viewing it in your room, it's one thing, but what is the clientele, the people out on the internet, what are they going to say? Feed yourself that stream and adjust to that. That would be the best thing you can do.
And one of the things we're dealing with is the fact that we need different LUTs for different, so our HDR output needs to be different than our SDR output. And now there's raw converters, but that's depending on somebody else's LUT. So basically having your own LUT means that you can make that fine adjustment to make it look just the way you want it for, what the output is. Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington says, I've used the box of crayons analogy to help explain color. Box of 4, box of 64. Is that an accurate way to describe the color depth and color space?
It's an interesting way. I say that. It's so.
But to a civilian, to a client that doesn't understand, they want to pay for something that's going to give them something other than what the setting in a camera would look like. Like, well, I've got this antique setting and everything's turned sepia. It's like,
right. In that situation, I would do a comparison because it's very easy. And also remember, your eyes don't work in absolutes. They work in ratios. So if your monitors are off and you keep staring at it, slowly your eyes will white balance and it'll start look fine. Put that against something that looks the way that you want it to look and see how quickly you realize, oh, this is a mess, right? So usually what we will do is pull a lookbook of stills from movies, stills from commercials, shots you've done yourself, and see where you want it to fall, and then try to get what you have to that. But comparison is a very big thing. The same way that right now we have better screens everywhere. So if you have an older phone and you go look at a new iPhone, you very quickly see the difference. And that will force you to start moving forward. If you don't see that comparison, then you won't move.
Next question is from Juancy Robles in Mexico. What are the top 5 no-nos of coloring?
Buying a random LUT on the internet and then hoping that it works out. That's
number
would be
one.
1, 2, 3, and 4. 5. Okay, so know what you're delivering to. If it's just you and YouTube, a Rec 709 out, it's fine. If you're delivering for Netflix or something like that, then you have to worry about HDR and doing trims. So building a proper pipeline so that you do your work in scene referred, which is the broadest space that you can work with as far as the color and the tonal gamma. And then at the very last point, you change to display referred. You want to do your work in scene referred because it's the largest space. So that would be my 2 main things would be that.
Next question is from Liberty White. Can you give us an example of what you meant by knowing where you're coming from and going to?
Oh, so let's say if you shoot in RAW or log, your footage is looking kind of grayish and washed out, that's in log, right? So that's where you're coming from. What you're going to be going to is some sort of a display referred space, a color space, whether it's a Rec 709 or a P3, right? Those are the main ones. If you're doing stuff for Netflix or anything like that, okay, you might put your P3 within a Rec 20 box or container, and deliver like that. But what is your final output and what is your client asking for? They usually will give you specs, like the frame rates and the color space and everything like that. So that's where you're going to be delivering to, but where are you coming from? Now, if you shoot in Rec 709, then you'll probably be doing more of a shading your scene because you're already in the space that you're going to be delivering to, right?
Yeah. And hopefully, the main thing is all you're doing, those pixels are all just there, right? They're just colors. Like you have to remember the pixel is just a number. And it's not, there's nothing special about that other than it has a number. Now, that number might have 10 bits or 8 bits or 12 bits. So that depends on how many of those numbers are available to it. So if it's got, a 8-bit, it's got 256 levels. If it's 10-bit, it's got 1024, and if it's 12-bit, it's got 4096. Of levels that it could be in each color channel. The main thing is that all that is just color coming in and coming. It took me a little while to get my head around that. It's just a color. It's just a number in there that has, and then you're just transforming that number. And really, it's just taking that number and moving it somewhere else for each pixel, according to the math that you're using. But that math is again it's like trying to get to a city. You got 709 is, let's say, Pittsburgh. I'm trying to get there, and then but you got to know, like, Sony has a different set of logs than Blackmagic. Then what they call log is a different city. that they're Sony's over here and Aries over here, and you have to the transform function that you're doing there is to get you from this city to that city, to get you from this color space, these numbers, to this number. There's some math that we understand that this is what it's going to take to transform from one to the other. So, which you can do you can also do rough. You don't need the LUTs. Like, you can just do it. I mean, you can do the color correction without that. But it's just harder. The LUTs are kind of a cheat sheet of, we know that this is the way it should get from one to the other.
Yeah. And also, if you're working in a larger team, that math becomes very important, because somebody down the pipeline is expecting certain primaries or color values from you. But when it's you can take some liberties to get creative and do what you want, as long as you know what your final out is going to be, and you could shoot in what you want and output what you want. You could have some fun with it, play with it, and get used to what it can do and what it cannot do.
And you need a wide variety of footage too when you're trying to figure that out, because something that works with this footage, you give it something else with a bunch of different color, and your LUT or whatever you created may be completely off. Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. He said, in the stage lighting industry, colors are often represented in specific numbers of gels. Can those be examples of color spaces?
Not color spaces, but hue and Kelvin of how it would shift. Now, usually, if we're doing a color chart, we've removed all the gels and shot the chart, and then brought everything back in. Stage lighting is very creative, right? Because you're trying to set a tone and a mood, and everything has a purpose. So then at that point, you are not going to grade your way out of what was shot, because you want to keep the photographic intent of what was shot. At that point, it's just be a good shepherd of what you're capturing and deliver it as intended. Okay, you're not going to grade yourself out of that. You want to keep what is shot for the story and move that along the pipe.
Next question is from Kyle Hammond. He said, what do I need to have open to work along with you for the next hour? So I think if we do another second hour, what would we, I think it's just Resolve, right? And some sample files.
Yeah, just Resolve. Yeah. Look, and this is not a quick process. We knew that this was going to be like really fast, and it gets deep very quick. And look, I'm still learning stuff. I'm trying to read white papers. And the same thing that we're doing here in office hours, you're just trying to get better than you were yesterday, right? Like,
absolutely. And
that's it.
And we're going to do, this was kind of an introduction. We're going to do labs, where, when Charles has time, it's where we'll all have the same sample files, like what we're doing with Isadora. Like, here's a bunch of charts, here's a couple of things, and let everyone start working on it and asking questions. And we'll be doing more and more of that. Go ahead, Stuart.
Just on sample files, Charles, I've already got a directory on Mega where I've put some sample files. If you want to send me sample files, I can put them on the same place, and they can be hosted for everyone to be able to access free.
Nice. Yeah, this seems like it's going to be the start of a lot.
Yeah,
We're going to be doing a lot with this. So this is awesome.
Noah Sargent asks, how would you use the X-Rite color checker passport photo with Resolve?
In the same way. Inside of the settings, you will find that particular chart and it'll give you the grid, and just move the points. And then try and figure out what color space you shot in and where you're trying to go to. Now, you don't have to go to a Rec 709. It has different options. If you wanted to stay in scene referred, you could do that as well. And then create your ODT later down the pipeline or in the timeline as a global change. And this gets into the weeds, but yeah, in the same process.
Wansi Robles asks, can you add a custom chart to Resolve?
I have not seen that, but if you do figure that out, let me know.
I don't think you can. I think we have to campaign for them to put more charts in, like the 12R. Like I just sent a 12R to a set, and it came back, and I just thought, of course they'll have it there. They don't. So the next question is from Douglas Carmichael. He said, would there be a test footage and basic guide to coloring that I can use for those that don't own the cameras? Yeah, we'll get that up in the next. We're going to get some sample files up for you all. Next question is from Stuart Fairweather. Where are the limits of applying a LUT to ProRes encoded footage compared to CineDNG RAW / ProRes RAW / BRAW?
Right, so ProRes 422 Lite, 4444, right? There's different flavors of ProRes. So you inherently won't get the same data. It's just not there. It's been converted to ProRes. It might look raw because it's grayed out, but you don't have all the data. I've been on projects where I've graded and done masks and very fine-tuned things, and then I'm given a ProRes and I'll replace it, and I'll have jaggies and junk because down at the core, we just don't have that data. Now, it depends how heavy your grade and compositing you're doing. But once you go outside of raw and log, then you lose that metadata. You're outside the field, and you just start experimenting, see how far you can push it, because it will break.
Yeah. Next question is from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. What is the color space of Blackmagic RAW, Canon RAW, etc.?
Oh, they're all different. I could find a chart, but if you look, for the manufacturers, they will show you a chart of what their color space is covering within what the human eye can see, right? And it will usually go past that, but we cannot recreate those colors.
We got the WLM is open. Sorry, 1 second. I can't. You got to, Stuart, you have to mute that. I can't do it. There we go. All right. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so each color space from each manufacturer, it will show you like that big triangle, and they're all different. And they all capture based on their math, right? Past the sensor, and they process it in their own way. My favorite is log C from, let's say from the Alexa, Ari. They have focused more on getting better pixels rather than more pixels, right?
Yeah.
So.
Next question is from Marty Atias. He said, in Maryland, Charles, can you show us what an ideal graph looks like?
Like a node graph?
I think that was actually like, what is that when you see the chart? What is that? What does the ideal chart look like when you were showing the grayscale?
Oh, so the grayscale. I'm going to share the screen again. The grayscale. It's supposed to be gray, right? So in your waveform, that stepping cross, that should be white. All your colors, RGBs, should be sitting on top of each other, and it will create white. That will be balanced, right? If you see red sitting on top of something, you will see that in your image. Now, it might be subtle, or depending on your this screen or display that you have, it might not look like it, but that's a display. But if you look at the data that is coming from the waveform, well, you can see something is off. And when you pass it on to somewhere else, a different screen, that might actually show up. So you want to resolve that.
And as a note, the grayscale itself is not enough. You have to go back and look at all the colors, because the colors are an exaggerated version. The grayscale gets you into the ballpark, but then those colors can still be off, you know, especially the skin colors. And so you have to go back and compare all those colors together. Next question is from Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia. How do you define the difference between color correction and color grading?
So what we were doing today, very quickly, was a bit of color correcting. Okay, you want to balance things out and get it as clean as possible. And color grading is more the creative intent that you see in films. It's like a big one is the Joker, right? Everybody knows, like, it has a certain feel and color. That is color grading, where you are giving it a tone, a density, a depth within the frame, just using your lift, gamma gain, and your primaries.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. He said, can you apply a LUT to a camera in a live setting?
Yes, you can. But I would suggest doing a lot of tests. You could shoot a chart in the person and then do a LUT and then feed that LUT to the camera and then check your stream.
Yeah.
Test as much as possible.
And one thing that we've experimented with is in some hardware like the FS-HDR, you can apply LUTs to the feed as it goes through. We've had a couple performance issues, so we're not recommending that yet, but we're trying to figure out where that was before we. Yeah. It could have been in a couple different places, so we're still doing R&D in that area. Next question is from Sky Gleason. He said, what does color do emotionally in visual media?
Oh, it does everything. It's the actor in the scene that you don't see, but you feel, you could say. Like, it carries you emotionally based on how we do interact with hues and colors. Like, for example, if you see something that is blue and dark, it's not going to feel very happy to you, right? But you do the same scene with a lot of contrast and bright colors, it's going to give you a different feel. So the emotional weight you can have a color, it's something that they spend a lot of time in movies trying to perfect and get it to help tell the story better.
Next question is from Stuart Fairweather. He says, cheekily, what's the best way for a cinematographer to get a colorist to, quote unquote, do it my way, but for using the correct first node? Go ahead, Stuart.
I should just point out linear camera, linear to log transform first.
Right, there's a lot of, you can go into XYZ space, which is done in a lot of big studios, and that's a whole nother story. Yeah, it's a,
there's a lot we get a lot of back and forth between cinematographers who get very frustrated with the fact that they shot it the way that they thought that it would be. And we've had some that really control they want to give it to you again in a linear space where you don't, they've thrown away most of the data other than what they wanted. I haven't, in the houses that I've worked in, they have to be really good to be that controlling, like incredibly good, like maybe top 10 in the world, people, not percentage, to get away with it and keep on getting jobs, because it's just that there's a huge pipeline and you're putting a spike in it. Yeah. So anyway, next question is from Juan C. Robles in Mexico. He says, how do you set up your project in Resolve to create the LUTs?
Unmanaged, completely unmanaged. And that's another conversation that we can get into. like how do you color manage your pipeline? You could do it yourself in nodes, right? Or you could do it within Resolve, like DaVinci Resolve, White Gamut, or ACES, right? That's a whole nother conversation where it will do the IDT and ODT, the input transform and output transfer for you, so you don't have to worry about that. And even if you have the same shot and you test all of them, the final look on all of them will look slightly different because they're using different math. And at that point, it depends on the project and what looks best to you.
And one thing that we didn't really cover with this is how to get it back into the camera. And all you have to do is right-click, right-click on the image that you corrected and produce a LUT, like it's in the list. So you just right-click on the, go ahead.
Again, and actually, my apologies about that. We're trying to run through. I'll go into the after hours, and if you guys want to continue the discussion, we can do that, and I can show you guys that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Perfect. Next question is from Courtney Gooden. He says, is it possible to color correct underwater footage to get close to natural skin tones and accurate fish colors?
Yes. It's going to take some time depending on how muddy the water is and what your final look and intent is. But, you could almost do anything.
The hardest part is the more colors that you want to be accurate in a scene, the longer it takes. Like if I only have, you can, if you're willing, because if you say, I want accurate film colors and I want accurate skin tone, you start to pull in two different directions. Yeah. Next question is from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. He says, what color space do you prefer to work in?
I like to work my scene referred in log C. So I've been using RE log space for a very long time, and it's just a great space to work in. And if you look at their options, it's never like 50 different options. It's just log C. They've spent years and decades doing film and film scans, and they applied all that knowledge into digital. Like it is still the best looking space to work in. So that's my favorite.
Next question is from Noah Sargent as well. He said, I think I just asked one. Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia says, how is an open FX color space transform different to applying a LUT?
You have options. In a LUT, you're fixed. Like you built the bridge and you have your destination you're going to, and then that's it. There is no, let's say if you want to transform instead of Rec 709 and you want to transform to HDR, Rec 2020 or P3, you can't do that, right? But with color space, you can just change your mind anytime and actually just have options. But a LUT is a LUT and that's it.
Next question is, last question is from Noah Sargent. He said, how has HDR 10 Plus affected your workflow?
I don't know about HDR 10 Plus, but grading in HDR, it's amazing.
Right.
Now, that means that you have an HDR monitor that is calibrated. I have one here. There's a lot of conversations about how to get to and from HDR by big-time colorists that is good just to stand back and watch what's going on. Like, how do you use Dolby? But if you want to use Dolby, it's going to break the photographic intent that was shot because it's going to analyze each frame of each scene, and it's going to average out so that scene looks the best within the display space that you're going to go to. But there are big-time colorists, that's like Walter Volpato, that his argument is it's going to break the photographic intent of what was shot by the DP.
Well, but I think that isn't Vision, the intent is to give them their intent is to give them their intent to get all the way to the screen. I mean, the hard part is that the screens have so many different ways that they work. But when you start looking at like Dolby Vision IQ, where you have, it's looking at your the light in your room, trying to get it back to a pixel is a pixel is a pixel as far as the value, not just the best to the level that the screen can get to, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but it's an interesting conversation that they have going on.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of very smart people and color scientists. I kind of tend just to stand back and watch them go at it because they both have valid points. And right now, it's all being developed. We're building the plane as we're going and making movies, and it's just shifting. Oh, we're going to do it this, we're going to do it that way. And we're slowly developing the best process. But it's a bit like the Wild West.
Well, and we've also gotten super specific about these colors when the colors, we used to joke that NTSC was never the same color. Like, that's what it stood for, like it was just like, so we worry so much about these weird things now with HDR in our monitors. And this is a lot of my life is thinking about these things. And the funny thing is I look at it like when you grew up, just every monitor, every TV was something different. I mean, for me, outside of a Flanders or a, one of the Sony reference monitors, my reference monitor is my iPhone because Apple has billions of dollars, which they've spent on that. Yeah. My iPhone and my iPad are the two things that if I'm streaming, I look at those and go, okay, that's probably as close to, and I don't know how much you've done that, Charles, but I've put it up against a reference monitor and it's not perfect, but is it close?
I check just about everything I do on my iPad before I send it out because if it looks good on there, probably gonna be pretty good everywhere else.
You're in the ballpark. I mean, if it doesn't look good, if it looks good on your iPad and it doesn't look good somewhere else, there's something wrong on the other end. Like it's not
it's
like it's not
something broke over there.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very interesting. Charles, thank you so much for your time.
I'm sorry it was so short, but there's a lot of stuff to cover, but we'll be covering more and more. But it's been my pleasure. If you guys have any questions, a lot of people do contact me all the time. So just reach out and I'll do the best that I can with the time I have.
And we'll do some second hours here and there if there's something different, but a lot of it is we're going to spend more time. Again, I think we're going to try to, when Charles is available between stuff, doing after hours labs where it's an hour. There's a couple sample files. Charles doesn't have to prep anything. He just, he's just around answering questions while we all kind of work on it together. And I think that we're going to keep on doing this where we kind of learn how to make that work. And especially for a lot of us that have Blackmagic cameras, getting into a point, it's been really freeing for me working with Charles and getting my head around LUTs of just like, I can just build a LUT for that. I can just, I can just go throw that together. And I will admit, I still run into it going, well, this one's more complicated than what I'm capable of. And then I call Charles. so hey, can you help me here? So anyway, so it's great. Thank you so much again, Charles. It's just an amazing
my
presentation.
Pleasure. I'll be in the after hours for a bit until I get hungry.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Thank you again to great questions from our producers. Thanks for keeping that all running. And good job with our panelists. Great set of answers in the first hour and being part of the second hour. So thanks so much. And now remember that tomorrow is the long day. We've got education, which we're not streaming, but you should definitely go to. And then we also have, we're going to be at Todd Reynolds, and he's going to be playing music for us at noon. And you're going to get to watch how we do it all. And it's incredible, the production. So definitely check that out as well. All right. Now we're going to jump into after hours. Thanks.